Hi everyone, I'm Annissa, and this is Will FM's Project Showcase. In this show, we talk with founders and projects in the crypto art and NFT scene, otherwise known as non-fungible tokens. My guest today is Emma, CEO of Digitalax. Digitalax is a digital fashion-focused NFT protocol in Ethereum that is the first NFT protocol to have its digital fashion wearables recognized by a non-blockchain gaming company, leading Silicon Valley-based virtual experiences platform UCAN Event. Please enjoy. Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us again. It was an absolute pleasure having you on with us a couple months ago. And so I'm so glad that we can finally catch up in the midst of this madness, especially to talk about the changes in the digital wearables scene. But for the viewers that are meeting you for the first time, could you perhaps give us a brief introduction of yourself and what Digitalax is? And then we can move on to the questions section of the interview.
Sure, no problem. No, thanks for having me, Annissa. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Emma. And I founded the digital fashion NFT protocol Digitalax last year. We started in around September and then officially went live with the first digital fashion focused NFT live market in December. So that was really exciting as well. We partnered with over 30 digital fashion designers to create these really cool 3D garments, issue them as NFTs on our platform to be sold at auction. So to give just a little bit more background about myself, I'm based here in San Francisco, but I'm originally from Australia, in Sydney, and I've been in crypto for a number of years, about 3 to 4 years now. My background is initially engineering, so I love math, I love physics, space engineering, in fact, was what I formerly studied. And then, aligned with that, I also was really involved with crypto, both from a financial point of view. So I was involved a lot with the hedge fund space and worked with a lot of the key kind of JP Morgan people from the CIO office to set up a crypto hedge fund where we deployed a lot of options, contracts and strategies within Bitcoin and the market there. And then also worked really closely with Dubai government, looking at how do you actually implement blockchain technology into industries in a way that is sustainable for the whole economy there, because they have a lot of problems when it comes to expats and how they kind of sustain that. So yeah, that's a bit of background about myself to dive a little bit more into the project and give kind of a bit more of a holistic view there. So as I said, we started really looking at how do you spawn the digital fashion industry, because it's a really unique industry. It's an industry that hasn't taken off. And I kind of repeat this a lot, but it's an industry that's not standalone when you think about, from a digitally native perspective and what's currently out there in the market. Right now, it's attached very much, it's vertically siloed within different games and different VR or live 3D content platforms. So really came into the space looking at, well, how do you create this industry from the ground up, and how do you do it in a way that empowers the digital fashion designer or designers, brands to be able to come in and start generating value and creating value for themselves. So this is where NFTs were a really amazing fit, because as a natively digital distribution channel, they really are the most kind of encompassing when it comes to how do you actually create a verified supply chain that is able to track the different components. Particularly when you think about fashion, you have materials, patterns and textures, and then you have the master garments. We looked a lot at, well, how do you actually track this in a digitally native way? And NFTs and the technology around that really provides that. So this is where we started with our marketplace and allowing designers to come on and distribute their designs through that. But then always the biggest side was, well, how do you actually concentrate this market demand and activity into application utility? Because, NFTs in terms of digital fashion, it's very different to art. Art is, can sit kind of more in a realm of just staying cosmetic. But fashion, it has such a tangibility and an application perspective to it. And if you're going to build an industry that has any sustainability or any scalability within it for designers, for developers, for players or users interacting with it, then you have to have that core and application utility endpoint. So this is kind of bringing to the next stage, which is really, what we're wanting to talk about today. And I'll kind of stop after this and Annissa let you take over again. But it's the launch of ESPA, which is a project under Digitalax and linked within our whole ecosystem. And ESPA is the first esports platform for indie and modded content. And what I mean by that is it's a casual esports. So bringing forth this new industry of how do you allow any player globally to log on to a platform or an app and then start engaging in casual esports battles where they just start playing their favorite content. And we're really highlighting the indie dev and modder ecosystem because these are very much undervalued within the gaming industry, giving them a platform to showcase their content. Players can log in, they can start engaging in these casual esports battles, and then actually earn income streams through our native cryptocurrency Mono token. And the fashion within this whole ecosystem and industry, it sits very much at the core, and actually acting these digital fashion NFTs as the in-game authenticators for the players themselves. So it's all secured by the blockchain from that perspective, and allowing games to leverage off NFTs and exposure to the market and the security and the technology that they provide without actually having to go and code in Solidity or build in these smart contract languages. So yeah, that's kind of the start of what we're doing.
No, that's amazing. And that's a fantastic answer as well on what you guys are building. Because I know that a huge issue right now, especially with like wearables or NFTs, is that it's very, and I even spoke about this yesterday, that's very confined. It's very confined to one platform. And I even use like Fortnite as an example. Like the skins are just confined to one game. So it's now you're like creating this interoperability. And it's like you guys are basically like collaborating with Among Us Esports, and like for the platform ESPA. And I know that you guys like have like PAC, like PAC, which we can dive into later. But it's interesting that you guys are doing that because, a lot of people don't realize that there's actually so much to do in terms of gaming still and collectibles in that space. Like currently, like the NFT holders, there's like 147 mil. And for the games, like for the number of games that are across the globe in like 2020 Q3, there were like 2.7 billion. So there's still a lot of room to grow there. And it's actually surprisingly undervalued. So how did you kind of understand or kind of identify that and then decide to grow in that path? And how did that collaboration with Among Us even start?
Yeah, sure. So I guess gaming, really how I look at it is it from a bigger industry is that it's so kind of culturally tied to so many people and their lives. If you think about really every kid or that they ultimately start as a gamer because it's an escape for them. It's a way that they can kind of go into these different realms and try out different identities, different personalities, and really fully encompass that, which is something really exciting. And then I feel like a lot of the time the gamer in a lot of people dies out, and that's really because of the way that the industry's run at the moment. It is incredibly cutthroat. It's incredibly walled garden and a siloed approach where all the value is locked at the top within these bigger gaming kind of development companies and publishing companies. And that's a real concern because it creates a lot of toxicity when it comes to information transfer within the industry, and then allowing just players to come in and gain value from it and just do it for the love of the game. And then same with indie developers and modders, allowing them a really, safe and supportive platform that they can come in and engage with and earn value. Right now, the industry, if you're a developer, if you're a player, it's really about like a huge uncertainty in terms of your roadmap and your livelihood. And this is really what Digitalax and ESPA, when we started all of this, it was all about, well, how do you, literally liberate the gaming industry? How do you liberate and revolutionize it in a way that creates an ecosystem where designers, developers, and every player globally can really engage in it and start generating value? And this is a really important point because, like I said, it's not there within the industry at the moment. And although we're seeing, huge scalability within gaming, and we're seeing this exponential growth rate as a lot of our lives are moving more and more digital, I do believe that if these core underlying issues aren't solved, it's not going to scale to its full potential, and it's really going to go into this kind of very traditional way of how industries are run, which why I'm love kind of Web3 and crypto and blockchain so much, because it really horizontally democratizes a lot of things. Like you mentioned, right now it's very much a case, say for a brand or a player or that they go into Fortnite, it's locked within Fortnite, a lot of that value. But how do you horizontally democratize that? And it's not just from the point of, well, you can take your asset cross-platform, but how do you allow it in a bigger way where it actually ensures that when a player comes onto a platform and ecosystem, they can really cross-engage. And, there's examples out there like Roblox, which just went to IPO, and that's done really well in terms of really being able to bring together an ecosystem. But there's a lot of, still walled gardens within that, whether it's the company itself that are kind of putting forcing functions towards a lot of the development side and what's issued on their marketplace and these kind of things. It's still not really doing it in a right way. They're optimizing on something that is wrong already. They're not optimizing on something that really has fundamental scalability and sustainability to it. So that's really what we're aiming to do with all of this is how do you create this ecosystem where players can plug in at any time, developers can plug in any time, designers who previously never really were considered can plug in any time and really start creating value. So this is then leading into the next part. Well, how we wanted to do it was, how do you highlight the indie and the mod ecosystem? Because these are very much undervalued communities within gaming. They sit on the outskirts. It's very rare that an indie game or that now really gets highlighted. You have platforms like Itch, which really don't do any justice for any of the development. It's just kind of putting them within an index and that's it. So it was really about, well, how do you actually enable these gaming ecosystems, another really well-defined utility and platform that sits outside of their current in-game economy. So it doesn't affect that. It doesn't affect the current gameplay or the current user base, but it's another well-defined utility and application and that they can plug into and they can start leveraging the value of NFTs in the blockchain without having to fully go into that and dive into that from a technical and then even business point of view. Rather, they can have that value of NFTs and that market stream down to them. And then more technically, in terms of a security point of view, what that provides in terms of, attack vectors and giving value, locked value back to the players, which is really important. So it was all about that as well, is how do you start from the right foundations? And this is where we worked really closely with the Among Us modding ecosystem and what they're doing there. And we worked there's a, huge kind of cultural movement around Among Us at the moment. It's been going on for a few months. So really for us, it was about, well, how do we position as well to give it to, the most flourishing and liquid community within gaming at the moment. And this was really the core choice. And we partnered with Woody, who's the OG developer of the Among Us Sheriff mod, which is a really cool mod of Among Us for, launching on ESPA and having these amazing digital fashion outfits created, which we created with Kodamadachi. She's a core artist within the Among Us ecosystem and creating, really cool custom skins and digital fashion items. So we partnered with her as well to create those items that players can come and then purchase from our marketplace and spawn in game casually and also into these esports battles. And also the London fashion designer, Charlie Cohen, who's an anarchist in her own right, who actually inspired the designs themselves.
No, 100%. And that's a fantastic answer. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, we're moving from a rental economy to an ownership economy. And, it's not just about the interoperability and it's not just the trading, but it's about ownership. Like, it's moving from like entertainment and social, whether that's like single and multiplayer games. And it's like, when you see Among Us and you include the blockchain, it becomes like these like valuable items. So, in terms of the market, how early are we still, do you think?
Good question. So I definitely think that there is a long way to go. I mean, even the NFT kind of mania and hype at the moment, it's not the same as like, the 2017 bull run in crypto where there was so much speculation and kind of unfounded value coming into the space. I really think that this is very different. We're seeing key voices, like Mark Cuban and that come forth that are really supportive of the space. And that says a lot when it comes to, like, how do you actually drive this into mainstream? I do believe, though, that just in terms of the whole NFT market, it's of course it's still very, immature. I mean, I know when I was in the stream last time, this was back in like October or November, it was, no one really had heard of NFTs besides the crypto ecosystem and those players there. And now we're seeing like, I wrote an article like a few days ago, like literally 75-year-olds come up onto the street and they're like, oh, have you heard of NFTs or what's the latest with this? It's really like going crazy. So we're definitely at a really, I think we're living in an absolutely amazing time and to be building in NFTs right now as a project is like so exciting and so incredible because it really gives validation to like the underlying features of what we believed months ago and years ago. So that's really exciting as well. But I do believe that there's still core problems in the space that haven't fully been addressed and that just comes with the growing pains of the industry. And really for me, the biggest thing that I always like focus on is, well, the cosmetic side is great, and building, on this kind of getting on speculative markets is great, and art sits in quite a different category. But when it comes to, how do you really drive sustainable ecosystems that are built on, core tangible fundamentals, then you have to drive that market concentration and demand into application utility. There has to be that full cycle. And for digital fashion, the core application utility at the moment, it's gaming, it's VR, it's live 3D content. So this is really what we're doing with Digitalax and ESPA, is making sure that we're creating that full life cycle. So even when Ethereum has its retrace and Bitcoin has its retrace, and when we hit another bear market or that, we're not relying on those speculative factors, because the core vision and mission behind all of this when we started was, well, how do you really allow people to come into the industry and create jobs? How do you create economic wealth, economic growth and value, and people to come in and create a livelihood? Well, then you have to make sure that you're creating true value and sustainable value. And you do that through having application utility. So yeah, I still believe that there's a lot of projects that need to find that core application utility. And this is where, again, crypto is so amazing, because, technically, it's programmable incentives and financial incentives. Like, you can literally build an ecosystem and composable elements and programmable elements to that make sure that you can incentivize players within that, which you cannot do with fiat. Like, when people always say, well, why are you building in crypto? Like, couldn't you do this in fiat? Well, no, you can't actually. It just doesn't make sense, and it wouldn't work. So I think that's a really amazing thing, that a lot of projects, they've come in maybe from an NFT side, but they should also leverage on all of the other aspects of crypto, which is, putting out tokens and having a token ecosystem, because the value that this can create technically, operationally, and then also, financially, for all the participants involved, it's really unique. And I think that, it's the future as well.
100%. I feel like in the past 10 years, we've kind of been in this installation phase, and the next 10 years are going to be the deployment phase, essentially, of these games and these decentralized gaming platforms and protocols as well. And, you mentioned some of these core values, and I would love to kind of understand, how do you capture value? Like, what core values will capture these values? Because I feel like currently, like in this market, right, go-to-market fit is kind of undervalued and technicals are overvalued. What are your thoughts on that?
Good question. Yeah, I do believe, my approach, it's always hard, because, when you're building within the space, and that it's so different. I always found, like, when I looked at it before, when I was, not like as a core builder, but I was, had another role within a team or that, it's really hard to kind of come in and understand the market fully. And I know that we've had, like, even in the past kind of 2 weeks or so, a lot of bigger brands and that have reached out to even like jump on calls to just start understanding more about the space and how they enter the market. And it always ends up being really long conversation, because it's like, how do you describe to them the complexities of crypto, of NFTs, and how everything operates? Because building within these ecosystem, in this industry, it's so different than just doing it, within like a traditional market. And this is where, like your point indicates, you have technicals, you have fundamentals, you have other speculative factors or that, like how do you differentiate between each of them? How do you define like which ones are kind of, being oversimped, for lack of a better term, and which ones are actually, something to rely on for the future? I think it's really hard, but this kind of just drives home my point before, is that, well, you've got to really, pinpoint and hone in on, well, what value are you actually bringing, and where does that value actually sit? And for fashion and for us, it's all about the application utility side, and it's why it's super important, because we have to create an ecosystem that drives that. And in the process, then we have this amazing opportunity to liberate the current walled garden structures, the way that people currently come into the industry, the way that they think about it. We have all the tools, and we're in the exact perfect market timing to be able to do that. So it's really, our focus. And this is why I say focusing on mods, focusing on indie devs, focusing on the designers, focusing on every player. So you can be, a 9-year-old, you can be a 6-year-old. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, your background or that. You don't have to kind of suck up to anyone, which is like how it is now. You should just be able to enter and start creating value. And this is, just to kind of drive in the point a bit more, is I always think about Uber as a business, and really like why they did so well. And for me, it's like you ask people, well, why is Uber, such a global company? And some people will say, well, they have a really cool app. The app's really cool, and it's like a great UX, and maybe they teamed up with a lot of smart people. But then you go one layer deeper and you think, well, why is Uber a great company? And then some people will say, well, I can just log in anytime. It can be like anytime, and I can just get a convenient ride to my location where I want to go, and it's optimized based on the algorithm. And then you go one layer deeper though, and you say, well, why is Uber really such an amazing company and kind of so scalable? Well, because it allows these drivers access to a live market at any time. They can be, sitting at 2 a.m., they can be at lunchtime, and if they want to start creating value for themselves, creating a livelihood and income, they just open this app, they flick on a switch, and immediately they have access to value. And this is really what the whole point we wanted to base Digitalax and the whole ecosystem with ESPA and that we're building on is, how do you allow players to do that? How do you allow devs to do that? How do you allow designers to do that in a well-founded way that ensures this sustainability and this scalability? So yeah, that's really what we're aiming to build out here as well.
No, 100%. I remember reading like an article from Andrew Trent, and I think he was like the growth lead from Uber. And he said, he was like, it's because people think that, like you said, like it's because of the app, it's an interface, it's a UX, it doesn't overwhelm people. But no, it's actually because they have a hyper marketplace. It's because you can access it all over the world, and there's a bunch of people that can use it, and there's an endless supply and demand. And whether, they manage the stickiness, that's another thing, but it's true, it's 100%. But in terms of like UX, I remember you mentioned like, it's having to teach people the blockchain. And a lot of people, it's tough. A lot of people don't remember their seed phrases. A lot of people aren't used to paying gas. A lot of people aren't used to passwords even. So it's like, how do you create an interface? And this is gonna, link to the next point, but how do you create an interface that doesn't become so overwhelming for newcomers into the space when you're trying to adopt that mainstream adoption? And I think that we can see this in this like design that you guys just updated, which I would love to kind of have you touch on as well.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a really tricky part. And I can tell you, I've been on the ground when building all of this and going into core communities and speaking about, even when we're partnering with these devs and these designers and that, in most of them, I'd say like 95% have no idea about crypto, never done anything in it before. So it becomes like a huge educational process. You're not just like trying to, explain to them what value we're creating, but you're also trying to explain to them, well, this is what NFTs are, and this is what crypto, and this is why it's not a scam, and this is why this, because it always has that pre-connotations. So definitely, I think from that side, and then and the interface that they interact with it does become important, because that's how, a Web 2.0 native user, how they move to Web 3.0, it's through the interface, that's the interaction. So this is really what we always try to do, and I think it's two components, and this is what we experienced, to just take a leaf out of Digitalax when starting that. It was getting these digital fashion designers on board as well and saying, well, can you trust us to just create a 3D garment to list it on our platform and have you highlighted? There was, a lot of kind of, had to be a lot of effort and work put into that as well. And that was back in, September and October last year, because they had never heard of crypto as well. And how I was navigating that, well, it wasn't just about creating, a UI in a sense to lead them through, but it was more like the actual, I'd say, like team interface, like making sure to like actually have calls with them, actually to, talk them through about how this will work and how we did it. Well, it wasn't, going to just really shield to start with, well, this is NFTs and this is why we're great and this is crypto, because for them, they had nothing to relate to. And so it was kind of like valueless for them. For them, the important part was the fashion. How am I as a creator going to be, valued with what am I doing? Like, why is this different to me just, listing on another company and then them taking the credit, or there not really being any, true liquidity coming in and injected into this? And so this was a really important part. Well, how do you actually then communicate to them? And what we did with the digital fashion designers was, speak in their language, speak to that part first. And I didn't, to half of them, I didn't even explain or bother to explain that it was NFTs, that it was Ethereum or that, because it just went over their head. And if not, it brings a more negative connotation, particularly at that time, because we're talking months ago, rather than a positive. And then it was more like, okay, making sure that through the UI, when it was on their platform, that we really showed, well, this is the design, and making sure in our communication, which we do a lot through Medium articles, like highlighting, well, this is them, this is their background, this is, their links to their social media and that, and making sure we're channeling to them, not us. And then when they saw that, and then we were, super grateful and lucky. We did so well within the first few auctions, and we were able to build up from there, that they saw, well, wow, now I actually see why NFTs and why crypto, it's not scammy. It's not actually, it's bringing me value. And I just saw that through this interface, it brought me, a huge amount of value that I would never have been able to unlock by just posting on Instagram or going to like an advertising company or something and working as a contractor there. So that was a super important part. And ESPA were doing the same thing. When we speak with players, when we speak with streamers, when we speak with the devs, when we speak with the designers, it's all about how you communicate first within their language. And we've, there's been ups and downs where it's been like, being, labeled as scams or labeling as, something crazy. I know there was like one community that's, was like saying, oh, this company is actually going to put your design in a Twitter bot, and then it's like they suck out your value through the Twitter bot, and that's how an NFT works. Like crazy stuff like that. It was like, oh my gosh, that's so wrong. And I feel like so sad that it's been, you've come to that conclusion through the demonization of a lot of media. But then there's the other side where so many people have been so open. So ESPA, the site that you can see on the shared screen now, this is really how we're onboarding players into Web3 and into what we're doing, and how that, and it's going to go live very soon when we launch everything on the marketplace and go live with our auctions and instant buyers there. But really what it's showing is, giving a more explanation, and again, speaking to the designer, developer, the player ecosystem. But the Play Now button, when that's live, what that will allow our users to do, it will onboard them through a really specific and helpful A and B like user flow that will, from anyone who is native in crypto and has been using it for years to anyone who's got a very first time and has no idea what it is. It will take them through that flow so they can really, before they onboard and before they come in, they understand what we're doing and what our mission was. And this is where we've been working really hard from a development side. We've integrated like Arcane Wallet, which has a centralized, Web 2 component, being able to connect with your email, which is super important for these players, and that to not just expect them to be able to, like you said, have a private key and realize the importance of that and not losing that, because they won't see that value there to start with. It's only when, we grow out and they become more accustomed to it that they'll see that value. So that's a really important part as well. But then also what we're doing and what we've done, and a bigger part of our launch and integration, we actually integrated with Matic Network, which is a layer 2 solution for Ethereum. And this was really important because there's been a lot of talks around, sustainability within NFTs. And my personal view on that is a lot of people come in with unfounded views, and they don't really know what they're talking about. They just attack based on superficial and demonized media articles and things that they've read, rather than really understanding like that, oh, they're running a Discord server. Well, I wonder what, energy in that's using. So stuff like this, but it was more for looking at financial sustainability. Well, we're treating ESPA as a mass adoption opportunity. How do we actually mass adopt players, designers, and developers into crypto where they can start unlocking value and then, go into DeFi and unlock more value for themselves? How do we treat this as a mass adoption genesis? And gaming is a core industry that enables that. It enables, people to come into crypto within a softer way, rather than saying, well, here's like a yield farming protocol and try and figure this out, which is really scary for a lot of people. And of course it would be. So how we're doing that as well with Matic, well, Ethereum gas keys, of course, the network is really, overcrowded and clogged at the moment. Not overcrowded, but just, very liquid, which is great. But it is driving up prices, and we can't expect players to come in and say, well, we're going to say we're going to list this item for, like maybe a really cheap price for them, but then you've got to maybe pay like $80 in transaction fees. You've got to wait from this. It just didn't make sense. So this is why we did the layer 2 integration to Matic as well, to really have that financial sustainability for players, so they can come on, they can interact with our ecosystem in a sustainable way for them, where they're not expected to kind of, pay these crazy fees. And we have an amazing partnership with the Matic team, where for the first 2,000 players in ESPA, we have a Matic drop for each of them, a 2 Matic drop, which is equivalent to around 200 free transactions in the network as well. So it was really about, how do you do this the right way, which what this UI is going to express too.
No, 100%. I feel like gaming is actually, I mean, even before, like gaming's always been like the gateway to many protocols. It's always been the start. So it's great that, you're taking that path and taking that route into building that mainstream adoption and building that bridge. And you spoke about, the underlying network, like a lot of underlying networks, even they're taking a lot of value, or they're extracting value from a lot of creators. So it's great that we're giving back power to them as well. And in terms of the fake news that you said, it's crazy that, I even had to experience that. So I'm sorry about that. But, it's crazy because fake news actually travels 6 times faster onto Twitter than actual real news. And so even on the blockchain, think about the stereotypes that there's already, it's just crazy what people are going to think, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, okay, so as we're moving from a Web 2 or in a Web 2.5 to Web 3 economy, right? So do you guys plan to ever implement any AR, VR, or VUIs or even CUIs, which are voice interfaces or conversational interfaces into these or your platform in order to compete with these emerging trends or user experience implementations in the future?
Sure. Yeah. So, look, I think that we're at such an early stage that there's going to still be markets and industries and trends that will spawn that we have we can't even comprehend. And this is what happens, when there's a lot of new technological innovation. And I wrote about this in one of our file format engineering releases, because we also are building out that to scale technical interoperability of assets and of 3D assets and of our platform itself, and then just the broader, information transfer community. But I wrote about this, that a lot of, technical innovation, it's not actually just the technology that really matters in the innovation. Of course, that's a huge, huge component, but it's also the business model that you actually attach to that. How do you actually wrap the technology in a model? And this one, coming back to your point about interfaces, the business model really is often the interface to the technology. How do you wrap that in a way that onboards people into these Web3 environments, or how do you do it in a way that really creates value for them and speaks to them in a way where they think that it's creating value? Just to give the basic example, and for lack of a better example, well, there probably is a better example, but I'll just use Facebook because it's what comes to mind, but not that I support a lot of the stuff that they do. But Facebook, when they started, it was this very new era of Web 2 and internet. And no one really knew how to interact with it. And then, a lot of what kind of spawned them into mainstream adoption and such scalability and exponential growth, well, it was then the business model that they brought forth around advertising, which didn't exist before. So it was really wrapping the technology that they brought forth around, how people could communicate online into a business model that then made sense for the users. And, the users also felt like they were getting value because they were coming onto a platform they could communicate. And then it's very different now, but I would say in the early stages, the advertising was very different the way that they approached it. Or maybe not very different, but just not as it is today. I definitely think that that's a really important part. And to kind of go back into gaming and what we're doing with Digitalax and ESPA, well, it's very much the same thing. It's, we can't expect... And this is, even like you said, the fake news and how it spreads 6 times faster. Well, that's even another point. We can't expect new users to just come in and although so many of them are, which is a huge bonus, but a lot of them still aren't. We can't just expect them to come in and be accustomed, because what I always know is when people don't understand things properly, they always make the worst assumptions and they always assume the worst things, and you start engaging in cognitive dissonance with them. I mean, you can't actually communicate with them the truth because they're so blinded by their beliefs and what they've come to, back up in their minds. They've created these strong frameworks in their mind, and you cannot break them in a traditional sense. You can't bring logical arguments to them about, well, this is why you're wrong here. This is why actually it's not a scam. Well, this is why they just, it's pointless. What I would say, it just doesn't work. It's really this cognitive dissonance battle, which I've been experiencing for the past few months, really, when we've been building a lot of this out. So that's just what comes with it. And this is why it's so important when you're, going into these segments and you're creating these ecosystems, that you identify that. And then you look at, okay, what are hacks? How can I engineer a hack to make this work? And this is where, a point of when you're saying trends and how do you identify this? Well, I really think that it comes down to community as well. How do you, create a really strong foundation and community from the start, which is really with ESPA and Digitalax, how we're building out as well, and particularly with ESPA because it's got such a huge component between how designers and developers and players interact. And this is also why we created a new ESPA Discord, which we can share as well, and for people to come in here, was how do you create, the heart of this ecosystem for players at the core, because a lot of this is about, engaging and appealing to players and making sure that they see the value. Because, there's so many different attack vectors where people can come in and they can shut things down, and they can say, well, like I said, the Twitter bot scenario, which was like crazy. And I was always wondering, well, how did they get that? And then I was thinking, well, maybe it was because of the Jack Dorsey tweet, and then they assumed something. Like it's crazy stuff, right? But it's always, looking at these fundamental things like community, application utility, the core engineering that you're building out, because even, with what we're doing with ESPA, it's a long game that we're playing. We're not playing a short game. We're not playing something that is going to just pop up overnight. It's a long stretch, and that's what it takes to create real value and true value. It takes time. Of course, there can be speed ups and exponential growth in the process, but there's certain things that just take natural and organic growth, and that's what really creates the sustainability of it as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in terms of growing organic traction and even reactivating your market, that's a huge portion, right? And so I feel like a lot of protocols now have to be married with tokens. It's just a thing now, and it works. It's a great way to build a community. And so you guys have kind of used Mona as government. I'd kind of want to understand more about that, and in terms of stakeholders and what kind of say, or what role do they play in the network?
Sure. Yeah, really good question. So we launched Mona last year, December, on Uniswap. We're keeping it to DEXs at the moment because that just fits as well with our core values as a protocol and a project, maintaining that decentralization aspect. But we did a really fair launch. So there was a 10,000 Mona token supply in total. 0% was given to the team. We took no allocation. 10% was allocated to the treasury purely for R&D purposes. And we keep this extremely transparent. We issue transparency reports every month, which explains exactly where the resources were spent, all the invoices and everything are tracked for future. If it ever comes to that point, we can, very transparently release and time and stamp date everything. And then 90% was allocated for staking rewards. And this is where how this is kind of distributed. And again, it was how do we look at this from a fair distribution point of view as well, where this 10,000 Mona token or 9,000 of that is distributed through staking over a 12-month period, which we start in December and will finish December this year. So still we have about, I think it's 8 to 9 months to go of that total supply being distributed. And how do I say, sorry, I'm getting caught in my words, but people who own NFTs, so our digital fashion garment NFTs, and then also our Genesis Mona NFT, which is another different governance token within our ecosystem. They can stake these to earn Mona rewards. And then also people can look up their Mona ETH pair or LP tokens from Uniswap and stake and farm the tokens through this way as well. So that's kind of the distribution aspect of it. But then when it comes to more how it's used or what it's defined within our projects, Mona is a utility token, and we've really made sure that it is a utility token. It's not just a statement of a utility token, but how is it actually utilized within our ecosystem? Well, really how I define it, it's very much the gas in a sense between the designers, developers, and players. This is the income stream that they all are paid out within. So as we've moved to Matic and we're launching ESPA, we kind of started with our auctions hosted in ETH, because the token was still getting distributed and still getting, allocated to all of the stakers. And then after that, we kind of introduced Mona to part of the auctions as a hybrid between ETH and Mona that people could choose. And now as we're moving to Matic, all of our auctions and sales will be solely in Mona. And this really comes to, like you said, how do you create these, valued ecosystems where you can lock the value within them to ensure the sustainability, but then also allow a free flow of liquidity between other hybrid ecosystems and partner ecosystems as well, which is very much what building on Ethereum particularly, but then broader blockchain allows. It allows for that composability aspect and approach to it. So how it works is the designs are listed on our marketplace in Mona. This is what the players use or the buyers to actually purchase the items at the instant buy or auction. And then this is distributed, these profits between the designers listing the items, between the developers showcasing the content and accepting the digital fashion items into their pipeline and into their content environment, and then also the winning players in the esports battles and tournaments as well. So it's about how do you use this as a utility within the ecosystem that actually creates income stream and value for people, and enables them to start creating a career and a proper roadmap. So with our beta launch, in the next few days, it's very much starting with just the profit distribution from the marketplace and the sales there. But then we're building this up a lot to introduce new models. Like, for example, it's like, well, how do we bring, traditional fashion industry in this? How do we onboard the physical fashion industry into this? And we did when I talked about Charlie Cohen and working with her as a London fashion designer and what she's done in the industry, she's worked with Adidas and Assassin's Creed before, so has a really amazing, I'd say, hold within the market, and what she stands for and her values is very much aligned with Digitalax and why we partnered in the first place. But for example, with her, it was onboarding as well, her into this digital environment, and in a way that, connectively ties a thread line between the physical garment and then its digital counterpart. And how we're scaling that as well through our token ecosystem is then bringing in this idea of, digital fashion sponsorships, within top sports players within the traditional industry. Will often, a lot of their income stream, it comes through having these brands sponsor them and give that different distribution channel to them. So the same thing we're bringing within this casual esports environment. How do you allow any player to come in, and then as they level themselves up to the ecosystem, they can actually then get voted in through Mona and through our governance as well, to then be eligible for these digital fashion sponsorships, where say a brand like Gucci could come in and say, well, I'm going to issue these special edition garments that are going towards these players, and they will use them as their identity markers and authenticators in game to enable them within the ecosystem and bring out new monetization models, which is a really important point to touch on. I guess 2 points when you're talking about our broader token ecosystem. Well, very much Mona tokens there, and it's also used as the core governance. So we're decentralizing over time more and more, and also there'll be a profit distribution. It won't just be the designers, developers, and players, but also holders of the Mona token. They will also get distributed just for holding it, in incentivization from these profits as well, a profit share component there, and we'll be initiating that within this first, new Among Us Sheriff mod auction coming up, where the holders will also have that distribution reserved and set aside with them as we deploy these new profit distribution contracts on Matic. So there's very much that side as well, and then Treasury also gets a split for just maintaining that sustainability of the R&D, of course, within the ecosystem. But then importantly, on top of this as well, the other tokens that we have is very much the actual garments themselves, and they're a really important component to this, because how we're using it, well, it's like I said, how do you drive application utility into these digital fashion NFTs, but not just from the point of, how do you take the cosmetic NFT and then allow a player to take it in game, but rather how do you actually, make fashion functional? How do you actually embed functional component into the digital fashion itself? And this is where it's really unique that these NFTs are actually used within the meta game of what ESPA represents, and how players actually get longevity of access to these different esports tournaments and events. And that's where our degrees of exclusivity come in with the different garments listed, where we have some garments that are listed as common items, some as semi-rare, and then some as exclusive, which are the single edition. And these as well, depending on the degree of exclusivity that a player chooses from the marketplace, this will also determine, how, their access is within the particular esports tournament. They'll always be able to casually, play within the game, but then if they want to actually casually be playing within the esports battles and be eligible for these Mona token winning income streams and payouts there, then they've got to, have that functionality side attached to their garment, which, for example, a common will have a less longevity within a particular content environment than a semi-rare, and then within a exclusive garment as well. And we have this whole recharging and refueling system as well for the garments that we're introducing. So it's really about how do you introduce this functionality component within our broader token ecosystem, leveraging off the authenticity and on-chain tracking that NFTs provide just from a data point of view. And this is something really exciting as well, because it allows us to really scale this up and bring in amazing models where players can engage within an ecosystem. But like I said before, the price and exclusivity level of a garment, it never affects the actual in-game play. So no player, whether they spent, $1 to a couple of $1,000, it will never affect the actual in-game play, which is really important because we're not building out a play-to-win system where it, allows, for lack of a better term, whales to just come in and take over. But we need to have that strong distribution where you're catering to all markets. You're catering to a player so they can come in from a ground level, from stage 0, and then also someone else that sees the other value to NFTs from a collectible point of view, from these other different features and functions. How do we also make sure that they can engage with the ecosystem and get out the value that they're expecting? So that also comes with it as well, that we're making sure that there is this access within the meta game of the esports, but never within the core gameplay, so no one has an advantage on that side.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's interesting because now you kind of see like a lot of these applications, and they're trying to target like the core crypto base, right? Like there's a broad scale of applications, but a majority of apps or them, like they're using like DeFi and gaming to stake swap. So it's very interesting in that sense. And when you're creating a marketplace, like how do you kind of like price these assets fairly? Like how do you get that price signal if it's not based on a bid in your experience?
Good question. That's a really good question, because I think, this is one of the biggest kind of, subsets of topics and most important topics when it comes to not just NFTs, but anything natively digital. It's like, how do you actually price this, and what framework you use to price this? Because you can't bring traditional pricing frameworks into natively digital. It just doesn't make sense. You have to, use these kind of an asset valuation mechanism that is digitally native. And we spoke about this within a license standard that we introduced on fractional garment ownership, which was like an NFT issuance of how you actually issue digital fashion as NFTs along the supply chain and from a modular material pattern and texture component. But my point very much was like, how do you value these? And this is was our whole point. Well, how do we create this good distribution between allowing people that need to come in at a lower price? Like, how do we make sure that they're not priced out and they can come in? And then how do we allow, these middle kind of players as well to come in and also, get more of that, I guess, rarity and collectible sense to an NFT incorporated? And then how do we also cater to this more exclusive single edition side, which is very much about, the, I guess, longevity within the market and resale within the market of that as well, and how do you create that liquidity within a secondary market as well? So that's really what we took the approach here. But over time, it will be very much, and I really see the whole NFT space as more data comes into it. It will be like, how do you actually bring in, different data models based on kind of digitally native behaviors into these as well. And this is maybe where I can touch on the player development fund and player access card and pack and what we're doing there, which is something really exciting and really, again, to our mantra of how do you make sure that no one is priced out and we are creating an ecosystem that generates value. Well, a lot of gamers and players within the space, they have difficulty getting from stage 0 to stage 1, whether that's financially based, whether that's more personally and support based. So we really wanted to build something where it's like they're not just discarded as well. And because that's how the industry runs at the moment, it's like those people are discarded. It's like no one actually cares about them. It's like, well, who cares? You guys are on the sidelines, good luck kind of getting back in. So the whole point of ESPA was, well, how do you actually liberate that and how do you transform that? So this is where we're introducing, and yes, you have on the screen here, and there's also another article, it's called Digi Bundles. And these are like really cool kind of esports, digital fashion, gaming packages that we're bringing forth as another product under the Digitalax and ESPA ecosystem. And something really exciting where we're selling within these kind of products and packages a esports gaming digital fashion bundle. And what that consists of, well, number one, it consists of a player access card. And what a player access card, it allows for people who purchase these cards and they have them under their account when they're playing within the games, the esports battles, they get like an extra flair within the games. So that could be, for example, within the Among Us Sheriff mod, it's like you get a higher chance of being allocated as the imposter role, since a lot of people really love that role and being taken as that. So it allows this extra flair. Then the purchase of the Digi Bundle, they also get an actual special edition digital fashion item that is also created, and that's not listed just on the normal marketplace with the other items, but it's part of this Digi Bundle. And they also get, which is really exciting, and within this one as well, with our partnership with in collaboration with Charlie Cohen, they're actually getting a physical fashion item itself made by Charlie Cohen and exclusive to this, and it's incorporating a special Genesis on-chain digital material that's actually been issued into the Digitalax on-chain digital material libraries. And yeah, exactly that one there. And this pattern, it includes the Digitalax logo as well. So Charlie did a really cool incorporation of that. And this comes into our whole digital physical bridge on top of that. But the purchaser also getting this, and you can see the really cool jacket there. So it's actually a reworked military flight jacket, and incorporating the pattern, which is very much to what Charlie speaks to, about open source and reusability and sustainability within fashion as well. So bringing that side in. And then the last item that the Digi Bundle purchasers will also get is a Nft Memorabilia. So similar, to like how NBA Top Shot, it's always also about like how do you collect the best plays of the game. But we're bringing that same concept into, the real esports battles and a gaming environment where the best plays and cool kills or this of the game will be packaged within a really cool memorabilia NFT for these purchasers to also have and hold that as, from Genesis and forward. And then this brings you back to the point, well, some of the proceeds from these Digi Bundles and these player access cards and that they'll actually be going towards our player development fund, which is something really exciting that we're building out. And this really is about giving financial value and support, and also like other, as I said, more personal and personal support as well to players and creators that want to come into our ecosystem but find it hard because of financial or personal factors. So how do we support them in custom and unique ways to really onboard them? And the first 10 kind of out of this Genesis, these first 10 players and creators that we've identified through our community and ecosystem that have given us a lot of value as we've been launching ESPA and building out, we'll be allocating to them as well to make sure that they can come in, they can play, they can be part of the ecosystem too, and start leveling themselves up. So that's a really exciting part to all of this as well, and how we're moving forward with that side.
No, that's amazing. It's insane to see how you guys kind of gamified like your platform, which is absolutely insane. Like, where did you get these ideas from other than NBA Top Shot? Like, who came up with these? How did this idea sprout to fruition?
Sure. So it's been a long time in the process. Like I said, we're still a very new protocol, and operate, like incredibly like a startup. There's no other way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, I don't know how to say it. It's working 24/7, and it's just, I can speak for myself. This project, it's very intrinsic. Of course, there's extrinsic and external factors of why I want to do things and approach it this way and all of that. But also for me, just personality and really what I want to achieve being on this earth and living here as well is about how do you make a really big impact within people's lives, and how do you do it in a way that, revolutionizes so much value for people. And this is really, why starting Digitalax and ESPA, it was all about that. That's really at the core of our mission. And what we're trying to do, which means it takes time, and it's a big mission. There's so much to achieve, but it's so intrinsic in the fundamental values of why I'm doing this. And that's really important because, if you're really going to take on something big, extrinsic factors, although they can be very motivating, they die off very quickly. And I think that's why a lot of projects, they lose momentum, or they lose, kind of interest in what they're doing or the space, because if it's not something intrinsic that it's tying you to something. And this even goes back to my point, like, of how do you approach people and onboard them into Web3? Well, if you're not talking to their intrinsic, kind of values to start with, well, this is where they start coming up with different concepts around, well, why it's bad or why it doesn't fit, because they can't fit it within their framework. So yeah, to come back to this point, well, these ideas, well, it's really just, it's so intrinsic. So it's being so encompassed within everything that the Digitalax and ESPA represents 24/7, and always trying to innovate and think about how can we make this better? How can we bring in more value? How can we, spread the value? How can we keep, move faster and create hacks so we do move faster and we can get to a state where it's like really global and unlocking a lot of value for a lot of people. So this is really, where those ideas and concepts come from. It's looking from that perspective first, and then kind of drawing out a Merkle tree of, well, how do we translate this? And back to your point of interface, how do we translate this into an interface of what can actually be executed, what can go into the market, and what people can and understand and interact with?
Yeah, I mean, speaking about like, this is basically like an extension of you, essentially, right? Like this project is like, because it's so tied to your mission, it's so mission based. And, I feel like I love that you kind of tied it back into like talking with the community and seeing how it fits into a framework, because a lot of people talk about company culture, but they often forget about community culture. It's like, what type of people do I want in my community, and how do we find them? Like, what are my channels to find them? So it's amazing that you guys have kind of built this gateway and this community around you guys that kind of support your mission as well. So I wish you guys all the best with that. And that being said, Emma, it's been an absolutely incredible experience speaking with you. I'm utterly honored, and it was so much fun. And it's always great catching up with you, especially. So thank you so much for joining us. Do you have anything else to add? And also, if people would like to find you and check out Digitalax or even ESPA, where can they find it?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll drop some links in the chat as well, with like our Discords and everything. But yeah, they can. I mean, we're really moving our home and our community home onto Discord. And maybe I'll make a quick announcement where I have everyone here as well. My other Discord actually got locked out. So if you had a conversation with me on my other account, I can't access that for who knows how long. So I've created a new temp account that I've posted in announcements on our channels. So just like DM me back in there and we can restart our conversation. Or if you want to say, hey, feel free to reach out there as well. But yeah, very much our Discord. We also, have our Twitter and our Telegram channels, but I would really, instruct people to come into the ESPA and Digitalax Discords more, because this is really where we're building out more of the creative side. And then, if they want to interact and be part of the ESPA launch and that, then they can come on, they can purchase these items. They have to have Mono to purchase that as well, which is trading on Uniswap. And then they can, just start getting involved, whatever way that looks like. We're really open to a lot of things and interacting with a lot of people. So yeah, thank you so much, Annissa, as well, for having me on board. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right, see you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.